The year is 1373 in the Iberian Peninsula. The Moors were pushed way south by the Christian kingdoms, and it led to the foundation of the Kingdom of Granada. With the Islamic threat almost dealt with, it ceases to be a problem of major concern, as the Christian Iberians find themselves a new enemy inside of their peninsula, each other. Three specific Christian states have grown to become very influential both in war and diplomacy. Those states being the Kingdom of Castile, the Kingdom of Aragon, and of course the Kingdom of Portugal. Castile had more land, population and better economy than the other two, so they decided it was they who must annex the other Christian states and unite the peninsula into a single, unified and strong kingdom. Therefore, Castile understands that they must unite with one of the other states to overthrow another, and that's what happened. Aragon, being a more worthy ally in the eyes of Castile, plans the invasion of Portugal to happen in the near future. Portugal realized that this invading force would come in a very considerable size, so attempting a counteroffensive would be too risky because they would not have enough men to protect the kingdom from within. King Ferdinand ordered the soldiers to remain inside their garrisons to be much easier to defend. Portuguese military strategists knew that it was very likely that Castile would attempt to seize the country, not with a single enormous army but with separate armies penetrating from different sides of the frontier. It could very possibly come from the west, north, south, and even from the sea. But nothing was certain until it actually happens. It finally happens. Riders on horseback gallop in haste to bring news that they are indeed invading with two separate armies. One has just crossed the western frontier near Guarda and the other is penetrating from the north, crossing the Minho River in Valencia. We set our attention up north to a place called Barcelos, a very important village for traders and pilgrims on their way to Santiago at the time as it is today. There is a castle in this little village called Castle of Faria, which will become legendary and we'll find out why. This is home to an elderly alcaide called Nuno Gonçalves de Faria. Alcaide means landlord and he was tasked with the defense of this town. He knows the enemy that just crossed the frontier must come to him as Barcelos is one of the main roads to Lisbon. He realizes that Castile must take Castelo de Neiva first. It's a nearby city in the north that has a strong garrison and it's not wise for the enemy to keep marching with a considerable force on their rear. But to Nuno's surprise, the Castilian army keeps marching, almost ignoring Castelo de Neiva. The alcaide decides that he won't sit tight behind a fortress while a hostile army is just wandering through the landscape unstoppable. So he plans to ambush the enemy in a favorable place that would take away any of Castile's advantages. It's not yet known the actual site of this ambush, but historians believe it's in the north of Barcelos, in a place called Portela dos Feitos. It's a narrow mountain pass that is very suitable for ambushing an army with guerrilla warfare. The scout sent by the Alcaides rides quite some distance from the path and halts along the tree line overlooking the road from Castelo de Neiva to Barcelos. Minutes later, he hears the enemies marching along the path with their feet clustering into the dirt after a long day's march. Upon this sight, the scout decides he must hurry to tell Nuno that Castile is closer than they think. And so, Nuno splits his army to each side of the road, hiding between the trees and bushes and waiting for the enemy to pass. Minutes later, it's possible to hear the Castile host marching completely unaware of the danger lurking in the forest. The Portuguese soldiers are very eager and nervous at the sight of the enemy, and when they cannot suppress it anymore, they charge the enemy way too soon. Castile's vanguard has barely entered the kill zone, and this mistake gives the rest of Castile's army that is not fully committed inside the pass room to maneuver into a defensive stance and repel the Portuguese ambush. And to make things even worse, the Alcaide is captured but not killed, as the Castilian general has planned for him later in the day. So they bring him in chains and march through Barcelos, past the Cavalo River and march all the way up to Franqueira's Hill, where is located the castle of Faria. Inside the castle is a very young hero yet to be called Gonçalo Nunes de Faria, the Alcaide's son, who is being dragged in chains and injured by a handful of Castilian soldiers. The Castilian general demands that Gonçalo Nunes delivers the fortress in exchange for his father's life. Then the old Alcaide looks up to his son on the castle walls and shouts out loud for everyone who cares to listen. "Son, you would not be worthy of our name if you surrender this castle." The Castilian soldiers feel betrayed and used by the Alcaide, and thrust spears into him, killing him in front of his son. As he was bleeding in death, drowning in his own blood with a spear thrust into his throat, he shouts in agony, "Defend yourself, Alcaide." The now new Alcaide, Gonçalo Nunes de Faria, obeys his father and commander's last wish and defends the castle, repelling the enemy with arrows and javelins, pushing them all the way down the mountain. Castile besieges the mountain's base, attempting to starve them out, but they are running out of supplies, and with injured soldiers they must give up on the castle and keep heading south towards Lisbon. This siege is little known amongst the Portuguese these days, but it's a symbol of defiance, resistance and hatred against Castile. But this is not the end. Castile is hurt but not undone, and they will prove that in the years to come they send hostile incursions into Portugal until 1385, setting definitive ending to Castilian incursions as a result of another epic battle in Portuguese history, the Battle of Aljubarrota, which would be so crushing to Castile that they... Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos, please subscribe, leave a like and click here to watch a previous one.